Wide receiver Trey Palmer made an impression during rookie minicamp with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but he wasn't the only one. That and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome to the Locked On Bucs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This is your podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, so be sure to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts, so you always get the latest episodes when they drop. I'm David Harrison, credential member of the media, staff writer for BucsGameDay.com, a part of Sports Illustrated's Fan Nation, credential member of the media, covering your Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and now you can find Locked On Bucs and the entire Locked On Network on the SiriusXM app. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listen or your first view today and every day. And a special thank you to our everydayers who are probably expecting to see James Yarcho and Evan Klosky here on this WTSP Wednesday. But unfortunately, James is a little bit under the weather, and because of scheduling, just couldn't make it work for Evan and I to get on together. So today, I've got Logan Robinson of BucsGameDay.com here to share all of his thoughts and insight into the Buccaneers schedule, expectations, and what he saw go down in Tampa during the team's rookie minicamp this past weekend. Joined now on the Locked On Bucs podcast by Logan Robinson on Twitter at Logan's Twitty, founder and owner of BucsGameDay.com, part of Sports Illustrated's Fan Nation, also the founder and owner of Noel Game Day. I know we have a lot of Seminoles fans in the Bucs Fan Nation, so make sure you're checking that out, and also check out UFC Knockout as well if you're a MMA fan. Make sure you're checking that out as well. So a lot of work going on for Logan, but we're here to talk about rookie minicamp because, Logan, you were able to be on ground for Bucs Game Day during the first day of rookie minicamp open to media, representing the brand there. So if there's, let's start off with one player, the most impressive, the guy that kind of stood out to you the most out of rookie minicamp participants.
I'm going to go with Trey Palmer. There was two wide receivers overall, but this guy stood out to me the most throughout the day. Like I said, only there for the first day. Wish I could have been there a little bit more, but consistently making grabs. This was Palmer. He's wearing number 10 for the Buccaneers in his rookie season, but he was drafted in the 6th round. He was making some really nice grabs from some of the quarterbacks that were there that were trying out, and he impressed with his route running, crisp, clean routes, along with his hands making some acrobatic grabs over the middle, off to the side, to where the quarterbacks were having a off and on day, I would say. I know we were talking about in the production meeting, but not a stellar day throwing wise. So the wide receivers had a lot of work to do, but you were able to tell who had nice hands and could bring down the ball. But yeah, Trey Palmer certainly stood out to me as a playmaker that we're going to keep an eye on going throughout the rest of these camps this offseason. Yeah,
absolutely. Trey Palmer is someone, like, it's interesting. And actually, real quick before I go to that part, you talk about quarterbacks having an off day. Like, obviously, as a quarterback, you want to be accurate, you want to be on time, you want to do all those things. But if you're a receiver or even a tight end, like you kind of mentioned, it can almost make you stand out, right? Like if you've got to make these adjustment catches and effort catches and all those things, like that could actually be a blessing in disguise. There's been some talk, and you know, there's a good side and a downside to comps, right? Player comparisons. And I think Scotty Miller is a player that Bucs fans have kind of been happy with. A lot of people were confused why Byron Leftwich didn't use him more last year. And now we bring in Trey Palmer to the organization for the Buccaneers. So the immediate comp is going to be kind of that Scotty Miller. And, oh, by the way, he's wearing number 10, so that only helps accentuate that. Where do you see that comparison kind of match, and where do you almost see it maybe mismatch a little bit?
Well, the Buccaneers definitely want to add outside of their star guys like Mike Evans and Godwin. But, you know, I think Palmer, it could be a potential, you know, third option outside of the other guys. I mean, and there's going to be a good competition throughout this camp. I think what the Buccaneers did and free agency, grabbing some guys, one specifically like Rakim, Jarrett, that could come in too and compete. He was one that stood out right alongside Trey Palmer, David. And I was over here with the roster sheet. That's how it is for, you know, how you do your coverage up there for the Washington Commanders. And over here, I've got to pick up my rookie sheet, and all the beat is like, okay, who's this? Whose number? What's the name next to the number? And like, okay. And then you start taking your notes, like, hey, nice grab. Those two, Trey Palmer and Rakim Jarrett, they could be essential guys moving forward. And I think Trey Palmer is certainly ahead. The Buccaneers like them, drafting him later in this 2023 NFL draft, but someone that could be plugged in, definitely a nice depth piece, but a lot of learning to be done, and we've got to build some chemistry. This is going to be a big quarterback camp too. Once we move forward with Baker and Kyle Trask, they're going to have to start building some chemistry with those quarterbacks. And so it's a big camp overall for the wide receiver and QB duo. But I really like how Palmer stood out to us all throughout the day. I mean, it was series after series. We had 7-on-7, you had 1-on-1s, and then we moved over to team. And he made a few nice grabs there. The quarterbacks deciding to go with him just because I think they learned earlier on in the day that this guy was reliable. And if my ball maybe isn't so accurate, he's going to come around with it. And he's got a good hands, and he's got a lot of athleticism too with some speed. So, we're going to keep an eye on Palmer. And I really, like I said, Rakim Jarrett is another player that stood out to me, and we'll see how well he's able to do to be able to hopefully maybe be able to stick on with the Buccaneers.
Yeah, absolutely. Rakim Jarrett, a Maryland product. So me being here, living kind of in the DMV area, there's a lot of excitement about what he might be able to do in the NFL from local outlets around here. Of course, my question for Trey Palmer has been and will continue to be, how's he going to stand the contact? And I think that's going to be a big part of this equation moving forward. And if he can continue to do the same thing once he's allowed to get hit and once there's some real contact going on. Another player that some people have talked about standing out during this rookie camp, YaYa Diaby, the outside linebacker, and we were talking about this a little bit beforehand. It's a little bit unfair because the offensive line doesn't really have their full tool set at their disposal to stop guys like YaYa Diaby, but you understand that when you watch these practice, so you can take that grain of salt and still give an accurate kind of assessment on how he looks. So, how did big number 0 look for the Bucs in his first outing at practice?
The Louisville product, just initially when you first see him, big boy, good size. And so when you're able to add that onto a twitchiness and athleticism, it stands out even more. And we were able to talk with YaYa before we actually got to see him out there and perform on Friday. And this guy's got a lot of confidence. He's kind of down to earth. He said that this rookie class is already building a lot of chemistry, and he feels comfortable being down here in Tampa. But like you were saying earlier, it's hard to really dissect and analyze this position group until we get some pads on. At least give me some shells. I want to see some physicality come through them. And, he'll say the same thing. I think Todd Bowles also was straightforward with the media saying, we're not going to fully evaluate everything until these guys at their position group that bring physicality, definitely in the trenches or on the outside, like YaYa will bring. We're not going to evaluate that until we put some pads on these guys. But just going off of just the metrics and his body type, the physicality that you're going to expect to bring. You look back at his tape at Louisville and the impressive season that he was able to have this last year, it shows a lot of promise. And for him to be out there and kind of causing some problems on the Bucs offensive line already is really good. But I really liked his interview. If you guys haven't yet, make sure you go check that out. That was from last Friday. And you can just tell what kind of characters that the Buccaneers organization is trying to bring in. And these guys are coming in with some confidence, but they're really ready to learn. And I know we'll talk about Kalijah here in a few, but it seems like these guys are all on the same page. It's not just a one guy, all about me type of attitude, which is what you like to see for a team that is looking to bounce back, and you got to have a lot of buy-in. And YaYa is one of those leaders, I think, in that rookie class that is going to be doing that.
More coming up with Logan Robinson of BucsGameDay.com on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Built Bar. If you're looking for a delicious snack, but you don't want all the sugar and the calories, then you need the best tasting protein bar ever. Built, you got to try this. Built Bars are healthy and they taste amazing. They taste so amazing, you won't even realize that they're good for you. They're covered in 100% real dark chocolate and come in unbelievably tasty flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, and cookies and cream. These bars taste like candy bars, but they have amazing macros, bringing you just 130 calories, only 4 grams of sugar, but 17 grams of protein. And you can get them at your local Walmart or your local Sam's Club or on Built.com. Head to your nearest Walmart today, go to the pharmacy section, and you can find cookies and cream bar, double chocolate bar, or coconut puff. And if you go to Sam's Club, you can find brownie batter puff and churro puff at Built.com. Right now, you can get in on the limited return of birthday cake puff and red velvet puff. So it's Built.com, Walmart, or Sam's Club. However you get it, you got to try this. for making Locked On Bucs your first listen or your first view today and every day. Every day, greatly appreciate you coming through as well. Make sure you stay tuned here at Locked On Bucs. We will be coming through with more film watch episodes as we go through the rest of this year's rookie class and get our depth charts organized and set only for the coaching staff to come through the next day and tell us that we got it wrong. But that's what they're here for. Back now to our conversation with Logan Robinson as we dive into the rest of this year's draft class and how they performed at Tampa Bay's rookie minicamp. Logan Robinson, founder and owner of BucsGameDay.com, part of Sports Illustrated's Fan Nation, on Twitter at Logan Switty, joining me here today on the Locked On Bucs podcast. So, Logan, some guys doing some good things at rookie minicamp, but kind of like we've talked about, like you've mentioned already, it's a first exposure, right? It's a first impression, and even that first impression, there's still, I wouldn't say that's the final first impression. It's kind of an ongoing introduction to these players as we move forward through OTAs and then into training camp. So a lot more to learn about these guys. But let's talk about, you kind of mentioned Kalijah Kancey, first round draft pick. Let's start going through this draft class a little bit deeper. What were your first thoughts on seeing Kalijah? Because we know that size, right? Like everybody's saying, yeah, talented, fast, aggressive, yeah, but the size, like that's going to be the yeah, but until he shows the NFL that's not a yeah, but that needs to be talked about. So I don't know how you do it. Sometimes I'll see guys and if I think they might be a little bit small for their position, I actually make sure I stand next to them. I'm kind of like, okay, let me kind of gauge you. And I know how I looked when I stood next to Vita Vea. So let me see how I feel when I stand next to you and kind of compare the two. What were your first impressions of the first round pick?
Yeah, I've actually had a chance to stand next to Vita Vea, and I'll tell you what, I feel a lot different about myself. I thought I was big. I thought I had some good size, but now I really don't. I think his calves are as big as my thighs. But yeah, Kalijah, shorter guy. That's your initial thing that you get from him, but he's fast and quick. I know every NFL draft analyst talked about him in that way, shape, and form. Also on our site, David, we really went in and dialed in on what he's going to bring to the Buccaneers, his pros, and maybe some work that he needs to get done. But, the attitude that he brought, at least when we first got to talk with him in person on Friday, he listed 3 things that he wants to work on and bring to the table since arriving. He wants to learn, engage, and then execute. He wants to execute all of these things that he's learning and also engaging with some of his new players. He wants to learn everybody's names. There's a lot of things outside of just the football field that he's wanting to do. And I think that's a great thing to hear coming off of a first round pick. But just physicality wise, I like to kind of compare him a little bit to a guy that I know we have a lot of Florida State listeners that listen in. But Timmy Jernigan, who won a 2013 national championship with Florida State, was one of the top prize recruits coming in for Jimbo Fisher, was always a shorter guy, but absolutely powerful and causing havoc, getting to the quarterback and allowing a lot of the other guys around him to perform and bring pressure to the backfield. And I think there's a comparison here with Kalijah, but just the presence that he was bringing onto the football field on Friday, you could tell this guy is here to work. He came in great shape. Everything that we heard from interviews, from our first media interview after he got drafted on that Thursday night, to hearing from him and then seeing that execute, like he's been saying, execute onto the field, is everything you love to see from a first round pick. And I'm interested to see now the differences from Logan Hall last year, and we're going to see Kalijah Hall. And I'm interested to see is Kalijah at that step or even a step ahead? I don't know. It's way too early to tell. And we talked about earlier, I want to see the pads. I want to see him go against this offensive line and see how well he's going to be able to execute against a veteran like Ryan Jensen in the middle. He's going to go against a fellow rookie member with Cody Mock. So there's a lot of things that I think early on you're going to like. And, the one thing that we'll talk about a lot is maybe his size with his height. But the Bucs made it clear when we heard from them, they want to bring pressure. And this is something that Kancey, going back to Pittsburgh film, he caused big time problems for offensive linemen in the middle there. And that's exactly what they're going to want out of Kancey.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot invested in this pass rush for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So if Kalijah, Hall, Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, Shaquille Barrett coming back, like if they can bring a return on that investment this year, and even those more experienced guys take another step forward, that'll certainly help any situation. Now we kind of talked about offensive linemen. It's kind of hard to get a beat on these guys so early on in these rookie mini camps at OTAs. and all that stuff. So we know Cody Mauch is impressing with his personality all over the place. And of course, the affinity that everybody has for Ryan Jensen, you naturally transfer that over to the flowing red locks of Cody Mauch. But I really want to ask you about SirVocea Dennis. So again, he's a thumper, right? He's a guy who's known from coming from Pitt as a guy who likes to put hits on people. You can't hit guys at rookie minicamp, especially your own teammates. Even when you can hit a little bit, you really don't want to hit too hard against your own guys because you kind of need them to be healthy. But the thing that I really want to know about his range, how much did you get to see SirVocea Dennis? I know there's 60 guys out there, and like you said, you see a guy make a play, and you're kind of checking the roster to make sure you know who you're talking about. So how much did you get to see of SirVocea Dennis running around the field, and how do you feel about kind of his fluidity playing as an off-ball linebacker?
I'm glad you said range because he's a guy, long arms, long legs, and he's came here with the purpose, a little bit of urgency too. I mean, I think he wants to step in and learn from the veteran linebacker group, and we'll see what goes on with Devin White. But the guys outside that, like Lavonte David, he wants to come in and learn around them, and that's something exactly what the Buccaneers need. And if they can be able to develop him into something where, just depending on Lavonte David's future, you have a guy that is young and that is homegrown in your organization that you can keep around, which the Bucs like to do. If they can keep him around, that'd be huge. And being able to develop him is going to be key. But you can see the range whenever he's out in coverage. I think he did have a PBU on the day I was there on Friday. It just goes to show that this guy can be versatile in a lot of different ways. Yeah, he can be physical, he can hit, but we saw it off of tape in Pittsburgh. He can move around and he can be utilized in different ways. And on Friday, I think just watching him go through 11-on-11s, a little far away, so it's kind of tough to see at times, but you grab the binoculars and he's a guy that could go east to west pretty quickly. And in today's game, you've got to have that, definitely with the offenses and these offensive coordinators that are changing things up on you and moving around. Dennis will be key for that, but it's just going to be able to, I think, a little bit of patience with him, but things will work right. I just really like the urgency that he's came into, and listening to him and through a couple of the interviews and him out onto the field, you can definitely tell a guy that came in shape. A lot of these guys have so far, which is impressive, which is nice. But the urgency part of Dennis is what's going to be a pivotal factor in him getting better and hopefully being able to jump into that rotation and get some good experienced PT in 2023.
Absolutely. It's interesting because we read a lot about these guys, and I read some scouting reports on SirVocea that kind of said his range was a little limited, and that might be a weakness of his. And then I turned on the Pitt tape and I start watching him. I'm like, I'm not an NFL scout, but this guy looks like he's got some decent range to him myself. And then I'm on the Pewter Report podcast on Monday, and I asked Matty Materia, we were talking about it. He said he liked the range. You like the range. So, I think this might be one of those situations where, look, nobody's perfect, and we shouldn't, try to crucify anybody for getting something wrong. But I think this guy's got the range that maybe the Buccaneers have been looking for. And, we all kind of came in wondering, Cade Otton playing at tight end, had a really solid rookie season. I think flashed a lot of talent, showed some certain potential. But then you got Keefe in there. Cam Brate's gone. Rob Gronkowski isn't coming back if Tom's not here. So it was kind of like not so much if the Buccaneers are going to add tight end depth to the room, but so much when. They end up going with Payne Durham out of Purdue. Now, we were texting back and forth earlier here in the week, and you mentioned to me that Payne was a guy that stood out to you as well. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, he was, David. It was funny last year. I remember texting y'all and being like, Keefe is catching a lot of balls. And he didn't do that a lot at his previous stop and on the college side. But with Payne, you're expected. This guy is expected to catch. He's expected to catch a lot in the red zone. He's expected to catch a lot of touchdowns. And like you were saying earlier, David, it was really nice to see Cade Otton. The way that he was progressing and ended up being one of Brady's favorite go-tos throughout the season was huge to see. And you're going to expect some more growth, even bigger growth going into this 2023 year. And you're adding Payne Durham, who was able to see him on Friday. We talked to him as well. He's going to wear number 87 like Rob Gronkowski did here with the Buccaneers. He made a really nice snag. I think that's when I texted you guys off to the sideline, was able to get 2 feet in, but was an awkward throw again from the quarterback. But he was able to bring it down and stay and keep his feet in and run up the sideline. And it gives you a sign of good hope. That's what you want from a tight end. He's going to be expected to block as well. But, the Buccaneers want to add tight ends that can make some plays in this offense because you've got 2 quarterbacks that are expected to start, Baker Mayfield. It's going to be his first time, if he does win the job, his first time starting with the Buccaneers. And Kyle Trask, this will be his first start being as a Buccaneer quarterback. So tight ends is going to be essential throughout this camp, alongside with the wide receiver room, building chemistries with his quarterback room. But I really liked what I saw out of Payne. I like his mentality coming in. The funny thing is, we've been talking about it along the beat here in Tampa. A lot of these players have ties to like St. Petersburg and Tampa. It's kind of weird. So these guys coming over to the Bucs facility, this is nothing new. Them being right by Raymond James Stadium, David, they're all comfortable. So they're just here to work and get after it. So, Payne is one of those guys, has family ties over to St. Petersburg. So his family was ecstatic that he got drafted in this area. And, we're going to continue to keep an eye on him, but he's another guy. I want to see the pads on him and see how well he goes against some of the linebackers. And like we were just talking about with Dennis, I want to see how he and those two go against one another.
Wrapping up with Logan, talking about the schedule and what he expects from a Buccaneer squad that, quite frankly, everyone outside of Tampa is just not very high on. That's coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs. Founder and owner of BucsGameDay.com, part of Sports Illustrated's Fan Nation, Logan Robinson, joining us here on Locked On Bucs today. Find him on Twitter at Logan's Twitty. Let's turn real quick to some players that are on the roster that are coming from last year's roster, still with the team. Recently, Good Morning Football mentioned, I know it's up on BucsGameDay.com as well. They mentioned it was Peter Schrager specifically picked Rachaad White as his breakout running back of the year this coming season. He even said that he thinks he'll be a top 10 rushing yards getter from the running back position. So James and I here on Locked On Bucs, yesterday's episode, we went ahead and identified our own breakout players. I went with quarterback Baker Mayfield, which was a surprise to a lot of our everydayers here on this show, because I wasn't really fully on the Baker train before he got here. But, now that he's here, it's our job to say, okay, how can this work? Not continue to say, well, I wanted to be right, so I'm going to continue to bag this move just so I can make myself feel better. Who do you think on this Buccaneers roster, if you can identify one, could be a breakout player for this season, for this year's team, to help, Todd Bowles save his public opinion or perception out there, and for Dave Canales to be a successful offensive coordinator his first year out, if it's an offensive player even?
I think who we were just talking about, Cade Otton, just because of the essential need for a tight end to be productive in this offense. Yeah. I do believe, I think Schrager's right with Rachaad White. I think that he's going to have some success. I think with Cade Otton, we saw it last year, but then you also saw a total wreck on offense some games where, we were in the group chat wondering what in the world is happening. Most plays you're seeing Tom Brady throw it into the dirt. And, you've got some times where Cade Otton's in the open field and we're like, well, okay, well, that stinks. Couldn't get it to him. But you saw some signs where I think he's due for a breakout season. There's a lot of young tight ends across the league that I think are going to make some big time strides. And I want to put Cade Otton in one of those groups, honestly, because the way that he was able to show us and big time situations, making grabs, and was a reliable target for Brady. Mm-hmm. It's going to be the same way for whoever is out there at quarterback, if it's Baker or Kyle Trask. And I think that's going to be big for them to build this chemistry this offseason. And we'll see that hopefully here soon in OTAs, and once we get into obviously training camp, which is going to be massive. But I'd go Cade Otton for this. And I think Buccaneers fans should be keeping a close eye on that, because if you can add in that, we've already talked about O'Keefe, then you add in Payne, you've got something kind of to work with here, because out of nowhere, we weren't expecting O'Keefe to be a pass catcher for the Buccaneers. And not like he was nonstop in the game plan every week, but when the Buccaneers wanted to make some plays and needed to get it first down, they went with O'Keefe a few times. And that was really something that stood out to me, and I wasn't expecting that. And we also got to now understand we've got a new OC in Tampa with Dave Canales. We've got a lot of things that it might be a little bit different, but the Bucs are going to want to run the ball, and we're going to see how that works out with a tight end that I think is going to make the next step in year two.
I'll tell you right now, I left James's pick off of the list I read to you because I didn't want to take away too many players, and I had a feeling that you probably weren't going to go with Baker anyway. I tend to be an outside the box thinker on these kinds of things, and he actually picked Cade Otton as well, so he's going to absolutely love hearing you say that he is correct and he's going to rub it in my face the next time that we talk, that you picked the same guy that he picked and not the guy that I picked. And that's okay because I love Cade Otton as well. So it makes me happy if that happens too. But let's talk about the schedule, because if these guys are going to be breakout players, they're going to do it during the regular season. This isn't going to be a camp thing or a preseason game. It's going to have to matter when it counts the most. And I want to get your impressions of the overall schedule. But first and foremost, I want to ask you about the prospect of starting on the road in Minnesota. This is a team that won 13 games last year. I contend that they're not really a 13-win team. They're just a team that won 13 games. Some people will tell me I'm wrong and you are what your record says you are, and that's fair. But what do you think about that opening day matchup? And then what are your impressions of the overall schedule?
They've got a crazy stretch starting off with the Vikings. That's going to be your first game on the road for a new quarterback in this system, new OC. It's going to rely a lot on this defense, I think, first off. And going with the Vikings, like you said, a team last year that somehow found ways to win games, but was never sold on them going through the playoffs. And I think that was a lot of we're on the same page there, David, on that. But then you got the Bears coming in, who the Bears are hoping for this got to be a year to show some answers. They've got to make some kind of splash. And then, you got the Super Bowl guys coming in with the Eagles, and luckily you have that at home, which will be nice. But I think that first 4-game stretch, because your fourth game, you have an in divisional game with NFC South rival Saints on the road. So I'm just like wondering the storylines here for the quarterback room on how they're going to handle this, and you're going to find a lot of answers. That's a good thing, at least in your first 4 games. You're going to find who, if you pick the right guy, absolutely. But it's not the easiest stretch whatsoever. I mean, you could even go to your 5th game with the Lions coming in. They're a team that had a big draft, had a nice season last year with progress there. So it's not the easiest start for the Buccaneers going through this first half of the season whatsoever.
Yeah, no, I think that week 1 through 4 stretch was actually the stretch that I identified as being the most difficult stretch of this schedule, just because, like you said, the way that it starts out and the teams that you're playing and the implications that are going along with it and all those things. So, yeah, it's definitely an interesting start to the season. I mean, it really we'll see how it turns out. Like if it's 1-3, and we're say, oh, this is just a terrible start, and that rough schedule really impacted them. But if they're 3-1, hey man, you go into that bye week feeling like you can conquer the world potentially coming out. Starting in week 6. So a lot of outside perceptions about this team, national perspective, that this is just not going to be a very good team. I call it the anti-Brady effect. It's the opposite side of the coin, where once Tom Brady is gone, none of your players are talented. And there was no talent on this roster to begin with before Tom Brady existed. And that's kind of where people are putting the Buccaneers right now, with pretty much everybody, including, FanDuel is one of our partners, and we love them to death. They've got the Bucs with the worst odds to win the NFC South. Do you think, if you had to rank, and again, there's a lot of team building still left to go and a lot to see of these teams, but if you had to rank the Buccaneers right now where they are roster wise, with the Carolina Panthers that are starting with a rookie quarterback, the Atlanta Falcons who are starting with a 2nd-year, 3rd-round quarterback that they're not even sure they want to commit to, and then the New Orleans Saints who are hoping to revive Derek Carr's career, where do you put the Buccaneers right now objectively?
I keep things real. I don't know. We do this on our FSU podcast because we're there. We're able to see how the team chemistry is going, and we've been able to cover FSU turn from something not so great to something now where they're going to be fighting for an ACC championship, a national championship. That had to do with behind the scenes locker room that needed to change. Mm-hmm. When I went to practices, when I was at training camp, when I was at the games, you're looking at the locker room, this team was not on the same page whatsoever. And I don't know if that had to do with Tom Brady and all of the drama stuff and the divorce stuff going on in the back end. But when your star player, also the star player of the NFL, your leader in the locker room, is having to deal with a lot of these distractions and also the team not playing well, there wasn't a lot of continuity. And in football, you've got to have that. You can't just have offense playing good one week, you got the defense playing good one week. Every team's going to bring it. And this team felt like it was filled with too many distractions. It was atrocious. And you saw that there was like barely any fight in a game until maybe the 4th quarter when they really wanted to play. Like, okay, right, cool, we'll play for a little bit here. It was pitiful. And you also had you had a lot of offensive play calling that was questionable in a little different ways. Definitely starting off, and you saw some changes later on the season, but it was too late. They didn't want to make any changes. I think this team now hopefully is able to build some, kind of need to hit the reset button and build some chemistry with one another, get to know each other. And I think that's where you're going to see this rookie class come in and play and might help that even more. I think this team is going to play better than they did last year. I already think that. Brady's moved on. That distraction. I don't think he should have even came back for another year. It was obvious. There was no reason for that. It was just to come back. And there's a lot of ego to Tom Brady. That's how he is. That's how it always will be. And it kind of sucks that he put that onto the Buccaneers to have a season. Not saying that the defense didn't have its ups and downs, but the defense had some consistency. And there was some things with Leftwich and Brady that just didn't look right in this offense. And yeah, you had a few splashes here and there, but we didn't see Mike Evans sometimes for 4 weeks in a row. I mean, that can never happen with one of your top wide receivers, one of the top underrated still wide receivers in the league. That should never happen whatsoever. So, and definitely with talent around you, there's no excuses. You had Rachaad White, a guy that was playing well. Leonard Fournette was a guy that you could plug in here and there, but you got to put in Rachaad White because he's giving you better production. I could go on a whole rant here, but I just think first off, this team is going to be better because of building chemistry with one another, holding each other accountable. I think the only distraction right now is Devin White and what he's going to decide to do, or what's going on here with the contract and negotiations and all that. That's the one distraction that I think stinks, but I think that's going to eventually be figured out and ironed out. It's just got to get on the same page. And this team is going to feel a lot better and play better than what I saw last season.
Absolutely. Talking rookie minicamp for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers NFL draft class, schedule reactions, and a little bit of what to expect from the 2023 Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Hopefully a little bit of an improved product, which is weird when you consider that a legendary future Hall of Fame quarterback just left your squad that you would think that could beat that. But I mean, look, everything you said is fair. Everything you said is accurate. Certainly it felt like a team last year that was just, like you said, not on the same page, not marching in the same step. And if they can get into step this year, then certainly could see a better product. And we will have Logan Robinson, founder and owner of BucsGameDay.com, part of Sports Illustrated's Fan Nation, on Twitter at Logan's Twitty, back on the show regularly this offseason and into the regular season to discuss everything going on. Also, check out Noel Game Day and UFC Knockout as well if you are a fan of the Florida Seminoles or of MMA. Logan, appreciate your time, brother. I'll talk to you soon.
Appreciate it, Dave. Thank you for having me.
Special thanks once again to Logan Robinson, owner and founder of BucsGameDay.com, a part of Sports Illustrated's Fan Nation. Also appreciate all of you Bucs fans are coming through, making Locked On Bucs your first listen or your first view today and every day. Everydayers, keep it tuned in. We will be back later this week. I think it's just me back for the rest of this week. So we will come back with even more Buccaneers news, analysis, and rumors as they come. Drop your comments, your questions below on the YouTube comment section, or hit me up in email form via lockedonbucspodcast@gmail.com or in the Twitter DMs at Locked On Bucs. I'm David Harrison, credential member of the media, covering your Tampa Bay Buccaneers for BucsGameDay.com, part of Sports Illustrated's Fan Nation. Until we speak again, if you're out and about, please be safe, be kind to one another, fire the cannons, and thank you for joining me right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.